Yeah, my name's Rick Garrels. Again, my family's over there. We live just down the road a piece, and we've been coming here for about a year and a half or so, I guess. And like Brother Doug, Pastor Doug said, I work in Alaska. And so I work a rotational basis up there, which I go and work 2 weeks at a time, 14 days in a row, and then I come home, and I'm home for 2 weeks. And that's a long ways to travel. It's quite a commute to get to work and back. So you can imagine the traveling I do. I fly every other 2 weeks back and forth, and haven't always worked in Alaska. I'm from there. Was born in Minnesota, moved to Alaska when I was 8, and basically grew up there. Lived there for about 23 years, and loved growing up there as a kid. Most of my family's there, but what brought us to Tennessee was NASCAR. Yeah, I used to race stock cars in Alaska, and kind of followed a dream to get involved with racing down here. And we actually moved to Charlotte first, Concord, North Carolina, and I was fortunate enough to get involved with a NASCAR team. And so I worked for them for a year, and then that sponsorship moved to Bobby Hamilton's team in Mount Juliet. And so I worked for him for about 6 years. I was a transport driver and gas man on pit road, and that was a blast. That was one of the funnest jobs I've ever had. But I could see that there wasn't much stability in it, you know, for a man raising kids and stuff. And so I decided to take a look in Alaska. You know, it's a rotational job, so I am gone. But when I'm home, I'm home. And we've been able to do a lot of really cool things when I'm home. But the story I want to talk to you about has to do with traveling and stuff like that. But I'll give you a little backstory on me as far as my spiritual growth. Back in Minnesota, my family went to church every Sunday. We were Lutherans, and which there's a lot of Lutherans in Minnesota. But anyway, so I knew God, and I've known God all my life. But it wasn't until I got this job up in Alaska that I really kind of realized that, you know, my picture of God until I was 39 years old was He's there, right? He's always there. He's always watching over me, you know. But He's always there, and I was here, you know. I never really pictured a relationship with God, a personal one, an intimate personal relationship with God. And I was able to get this job in Alaska, and God, I know God put me there because, you know, I like to read, but I'm a busy person, you know. I don't really just sit down and read sometimes. And that job, we work 12 hours a day or more, and then the rest of the day is just our own to sleep and eat and get ready for the next day. So I had some time on my hands, and my mom gave me a book that I really enjoyed reading at that time. It was a book from John Eldridge called Wild at Heart, and it really spoke to my heart. He speaks of Jesus and God in a very masculine way, and it just really opened up my eyes a bunch, and I started reading the Bible more, and he helped me realize that it's a relationship, and that God is here. You know, God's not there; He's here. You know, He's here. You know, He's here, and so before I realized that, my kids will be the first to tell you I suffer from OCD. And I probably know there's probably none of you that ever suffer from that. You know, liking to plan stuff and things go your way and all that. But I used to suffer from anxiety. You know, when things weren't going the way I kind of thought they should, you know, and stuff like that. I used to get pretty anxious about stuff. And where it really came into play was when I was at work. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the shape of the state of Alaska, but it's very similar to my hand, okay? This is the Aleutian chain. Russia's right here. Sarah Palin lives right here. But so this is the southern part. There's the very north part, and that's where I work, on the northern coast of Alaska, where all the polar bears drink Coke and slide down, you know, stuff like that. Santa Claus flies over every once in a while. We see him, you know, testing the reindeer out. But it's very, very far north, and on the coast is not real dramatic as far as beauty. It's real flat, lots of ponds and water and stuff like that, but not very mountainous there. You think of Alaska as just a beautiful mountain-covered state, and it is. It is absolutely gorgeous. And but where I work is kind of very desolate, you know. So the weather there can get very tricky. In the wintertime, it'll be 40 below temperatures, and if the wind's blowing, the wind chill can get down into the 70 and 80 below range. But what everybody that works up there fears is weather on go-home day, right? Because we all fly into Anchorage, those that live out of state, and the oil companies have a charter of their own that flies us from Anchorage to a place called Dead Horse, Alaska. So go-home day, you're really watching the weather. What's it going to do? Because there's some times where you'll get weathered in. And for someone like me who flies so far to get home, it kind of poses some issues, you know. So if I don't make it to Anchorage, then I can't catch that flight I had booked, to get to Seattle and get home, and so on and so forth. So early on in those years, I got really anxious on go-home days. And it wasn't until I really got to know God more and Jesus more, and by reading and how the peace that comes from God can help you in those type of situations, And in fact, there was a certain situation. We were getting ready to leave, and the weather came in. It fogged in, and in fact, I was going to my room. We live in camps up there, kind of like a college dorm, style living, or barracks. But I was heading up to my room to go get changed and grab my stuff to go, and the fog had rolled in like an hour before the plane was supposed to land. And so I get up in my room, and I hear the plane, and I hear it coming, and then I hear the full power. It couldn't land. So come to find out, it landed at another strip that was a ways away, and I drove feverishly to go catch it, and I caught it. But anyway, I've found out through my anxiety and just the anxiousness that comes from not knowing sometimes. I really was able to overcome that, and it all comes from the peace of Jesus. Once I started, the other thing too that I want to mention is when I first started working up there, I was anxious about my family being gone, and them being here and not being able to be there for them all the time. And it really bothered me for the first year or so. And when I finally discovered, just what Jesus means to me, I was able to put them in God's hands. I knew God took me there to get me away from all the distraction so I could read and so I could get to know him, because that's what it's all about. You know, you're not going to know God unless you spend some time with him, right? And I spent a lot of time with him, and that was so valuable to me, you know, that I was able to transfer that anxiety and give it to God, you know, and knowing that God brought me there to get to know him better, I knew he was taking care of everything else, right? You know, he had my family. We've got my beautiful wife and two amazing boys, and our other boys that are here with them today. I just love them so much. So the story that I want to talk about is a story that has to do with travel as well. I was on my way to Alaska, and I had a connection. I got on the plane here in Nashville, and I was flying Delta then, and I had to fly to Memphis, and then Minneapolis, and then Anchorage. So we get on the plane here, and it's a smaller plane. It's a kind of a commuter plane, and it is jam-packed. Now, I see people from time to time that I recognize flying back and forth that actually work up there. Some of you may know some people that work up in Alaska too in the oil field, but I recognized a couple faces, but anyway, this plane was full, right? So, and the connection we had in Memphis was a short one. And I think it was for everybody, too, because it was a really early morning flight. You know, they try to get you out of here really early and get you to that next step, and then get you out of there so you can get where you're going. But we're all sitting on the plane, kind of getting situated, you know, and about 15 minutes before the flight was supposed to actually leave the gate, everything was the same. You know, everybody was sitting in their seat. Everybody was on the plane. The plane was full, but it wasn't going anywhere. And at this point, I'm a seasoned traveler now. I've shed the anxiety part, where now I'm just kind of sitting there going, oh, okay, God, you know, what you got in store today? And because I've learned that God will get you there when he needs you there, right? And that's 10 times better than when I'm supposed to be there, you know, under my terms, right? You know, I believe that wholeheartedly. So anyway, finally the pilot gets on the intercom, and he says, sorry folks, we've got a little issue in an exit row seat that we need to take care of before we take off to Memphis. It'll just be a few minutes. We'll have a tech on board, and he'll take care of this really small problem we've got. Well, what it was a meal tray that wouldn't stay up. Well, in an exit row, of course, if there's an emergency, you need to be able to get through there, right? So it wasn't a big deal. They could have taped it up and went on, but there was a co-pilot that was a trainee. So the pilot was, you know, going by the book, right? Which is fine. We all want the pilots to go by the book, right? So anyway, about 10 minutes goes by, no mechanic, and we're all still sitting there. But I'm just observing now, right? And you know how we all get when we get close to something, you know, that we think we're going to miss. We start to get a little fidgety, right? And I'm watching these people around me, and they're just starting to, you know, they're just starting to get uncomfortable because we're getting real close, and we're going to start missing connections in Memphis, right? And so about 10 minutes later, the mechanic finally gets on the plane. Well, he goes, the seat was behind me that he was fixing on, so he was back there working, and now it's takeoff time, right? And people are progressively getting more fidgety, little bit of verbal, you know, you can hear some mumbling, grumbling going on, and so I'm just sitting there and I'm just smiling because, you know, I know God's going to get me there when he needs me there. But it was interesting to watch the people around me that were on their own, on their own schedule. And so finally it's takeoff time. He's still working on the seat. People are still, progressively getting worse. And finally, about 20 minutes later, we're after takeoff time now, people are starting to get a little bit louder. They're starting to get disappointed and wanting people to know that they're disappointed. And finally, this guy gets up out of the back. And mind you, this is a full seat. There were no empty seats. This guy gets out of the back, and he opens up the thing, grabs his bag, just charges out there. He was madder than fire. And he said, I'm going to get my own self to Memphis. Right? So he charges off the plane. And right about after that, the mechanic goes up to the cockpit to do his paperwork. He'd finished his job. And, he apologized to everybody on the plane and said, sorry, folks, didn't mean for it to take this long and all that. And just as he's turning around to leave, this old man gets on the plane, this little old man carrying a bag. And as he's walking past me, he says, I never would have made it. So that was God orchestrating a blessing for that man. Can you all see that? That was God orchestrating a blessing for him. He needed someone to take care of their own business, get mad and get off that plane so that this man could make his connection, right? And the beauty of it, I'm sorry, I get a little bit emotional, is I got to witness it too. It was a blessing for 2 people I know on that plane, maybe even more. But being present with God, letting him have your schedule sometimes, all the time. We can't do it all the time. We're human, right? But being in the moment with God the best you can, you will witness that God is working everywhere. He's working in everyone's lives, doing different things. And if you're present with him, you're going to see it. And you're going to be blessed with that. So I felt so good when I heard what he said. And they closed the door on the plane. We left 20 minutes late. We got to Memphis and made all of our connections. Right? So I've been there. I've been in those other seats where I'm just fidgeting and mad. I'm, why? What's going on? Something you can't change yourself, but you get upset because, it's all about you. It's been all about me before. But letting God have my schedule, have my travel itinerary, has done nothing but bless me. So that's the story I wanted to share with you. And there's a couple verses I want to share as well that I really like that have to do with, and that's the peace of God, is being able to sit on that plane knowing I'm going to be late, not knowing if I'm going to make the next plane, and not caring. Right? Not just being able, just knowing that God's got my best itinerary. Psalm 91, the first verse, I love this verse. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. That's a powerful verse. He who dwells in the shelter, that's somebody who's actively involving God in his day daily, right? Will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. Can you imagine what the shadow of the Almighty, how glorious that is? It's incredible. So, and the other one is Philippians 4, 6 and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Amen. So, thanks for letting me speak.